So keyword searching is a good way to get started because you have to find an article somewhere. But if you just rely on keyword searching and you don't use tracing citation strategies that we're going to show in this video, you can end up with a lot of these smaller studies and kind of randomly too. You won't necessarily be able to figure out which are the key studies that you really must be familiar with. Keyword searching is a lot more random and haphazard. So instead, we're going to be emphasizing strategies for tracing citations. And there are basically two ways of looking at this. Tracing citations backwards in time, in other words, finding current articles, look at the citation list, the reference list at the end of those articles, and find the articles that they have cited that were published previously. Or forward in time, where you take a foundational article, say this one, maybe it was written in 1990, and see all the sources that cited that article since 1990. And Google Scholar is the tool we're going to use to do that. All right. Now, we actually want you to practice this, to do it before your meeting with your group. And so I'm going to demonstrate some of these strategies, and you're going to be expected to do them too, and add articles and citations to your practice collection that you've already been working on in Zotero. So you're going to use whatever topic you were assigned for the first module and continue to add a few more articles using these strategies. A few goals for you: find a meta-analysis or a good literature review and add it and tag it with your name. Find an article and add it to the Zotero practice folder by tracing backwards in time from those key sources, and use Google Scholar to trace forward. So I'm going to demonstrate all these, and I'm going to review these again at the end of the video. All right, so the first main idea is trace backward in time. The idea here is to find something relatively current, because the more current it is, the more comprehensive it is in including articles from recent history. So if you have a 2009 article and you're tracing backwards in time, obviously you're going to miss anything between 2009 and today. So you would rather have something from 2014 that you're using the reference list on to go backwards. So you want it recent, and you also want it to be an article that already did a good job of searching the literature. And there's a number of different kinds of studies or publications that you can find that do this. The first one that we recommend is a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is a specific kind of secondary source. And what meta-analysis do are they collect all the quantitative articles, usually experimental, that meet specific criteria that the author sets forward, and then they create an average of the effects from those articles. So in other words, cooperative learning is an example of an area where there have been many meta-analysis done. And people that do a meta-analysis of cooperative learning, they take a number of experimental studies, and for each one they estimate how big an effect they found from cooperative learning. And they add those up and average them out, and then they say cooperative learning overall is a certain degree of effectiveness. And there are meta-analysis for most every topic. In fact, there are meta-analysis for every topic that you can find on the Hattie website. And that's what his work is based on. These are great sources to use as reference lists because they have comprehensively and selectively looked at the literature from the past. All right, the second idea is just any article that's current that has a good literature review in it. Almost any journal article, primary source or secondary source, includes some review of the literature. Some of these are very extensive and some of them are very cursory. If you happen to find one that's very extensive and seems to be well done, that could be a good source for you. The third idea is the third idea is to find a secondary source that actually is a literature review. There are some publications whose sole purpose is to review the literature. And that would be ideal if you could find something relatively current on your topic like that, because essentially that person has done all the work that we are asking you to do. Now, obviously, you're not going to take what they do and just adopt it wholesale, but they've done a lot of the work, and that's the place that you would probably start and say, let me see what they say is important, and let me look up some of the references that they say are important, right? So I'm going to go to Zotero now, and this is the practice folder that Tiffany and I have worked on. And we actually have several of these kind of studies already in our collection. So here's a meta-analysis. And if I open it up, it's an article by Murawski. And what we're saying is that you can use this article, the reference list in this article, and what you would do is take one of these references, for example, Klinger, and find this article. You can usually find it in EBSCOhost. I typically copy the title of the article and paste it into EBSCOhost, and I'll usually find it. Sometimes I use the author's last name combined with the title, but almost always I can find the article. And if I can't find full PDF, I can order it through Interlibrary Loan and get it usually within a day. So you could go one by one looking up these sources that have been cited in the meta-analysis. Now, I actually don't recommend that you do that because that's too much like the keyword search strategy. It's a little bit haphazard. Instead, what you should do is read the literature review, and usually the literature review will point out, and it'll be obvious, which of the sources in the reference list are really the important ones that you really should find. For example, Cook and Friend is cited here in a very prominent place in the literature review, very early in the literature review. Usually those studies that are cited earlier are the most important. And you can usually tell by reading the literature review which studies are most influential. Often there'll be a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or even 3 paragraphs devoted to a single study that is considered important, and then 5 or 6 studies are all cited together in a single sentence somewhere else. So all of those studies aren't of equal weight, and you want to find the ones that seem to be the most important. Once you find those studies, we're going to ask you to add them to Zotero. So you have 2 things here really to do. One is find a key article, like a meta-analysis, or a study that is a literature review. Add it to Zotero if you don't already have it added. Maybe you already have one like we do. Or, and find an article that comes from the citation list of that key article and add that to Zotero. All right, so what if you don't have a meta-analysis, or what if you don't have a literature review already in your Zotero collection? All right, so if that's the case, we're going to recommend that you use Google Scholar, scholar.google.com. It's not the regular Google. It's a separate search tool. And do a search for your topic area, but add in the word meta-analysis. Okay, so let's suppose I'm doing the topic problem-based learning. I'll type that topic in, and then I'll add the word meta-analysis. And you see, I come up with quite a few that I could add to Zotero right off the bat. Right? So, going back to what we're asking you to do is trace backwards in time. Find one of these key sources, add it to Zotero, and then find a source from the reference list in that article and add it to Zotero. Practice folder. If you want to pause the video now and work on that, it might be a good idea, or you can watch the next thing that we're asking you to do and then do it after the video. All right? Second thing, second main idea is to trace forward in time. So that means you're taking one of these foundational articles and see who has cited it. Now, this is probably a new idea to you, and it's very, very powerful. I'm going back to the co-teaching search, and I'm in Google Scholar again. And you see the list of articles, which you might not have noticed is this little link here, cited by 533, cited by 286. These are all the people or sources that since 1995 have cited this in their reference list. So, for example, let me take this one, Teachers' Beliefs About Co-Teaching, cited by 282. If I click this, it gives me all the articles since that was published that have cited it. 282 sources. It's amazing. I don't know how they do this. Now, we want you to find an article that has cited one of these, I would call these very well cited original articles. I would call them foundational articles. I might call them key articles. We want you to take one of these foundational key articles from the past and find something to add to Zotero that seems relevant, that cited it, searching forward in time. Now, a couple keys here are that you can do additional search in Google Scholar from just this list. So I've got 282 citations here, and I can do some more searching. I can narrow the search here. Let me say problem-based learning. I'm going to say science. Let's say I'm looking for a problem-based learning article about science. I don't know if I'll find it, but let's see. Oh, I switched over to co-teaching. Co-teaching as science in the schoolhouse. Okay, great. I found something very specific that was from what I had just searched, right? Some other things to notice: you can narrow your searches by doing some of these choices, and you can search in specific time ranges. You can use the ones that they suggest, or you can make up any dates you want. So Google Scholar is the most fantastic tool ever provided to researchers, I guess since the original development of catalogs. It's quite amazing that you can search forward in time. So now we can use reference lists to find original articles or foundational articles, but we can use foundational articles to find more recent articles. It's awesome. Going backwards and forward in time is what we are calling tracing citations. All right, so again, here's what you're being asked to do before you meet with your group, because you're going to do the same thing once you get together with your group, and we want to make sure you've practiced it and you know how to do it and you understand it. We want you to find some good article that is fairly recent, either a meta-analysis or a good literature review, add it to Zotero, find an article that you found from those, add it to Zotero, use Google Scholar to trace forward in time from some foundational article of the past. All right, good luck with tracing citations. It's a different way of thinking, so it'll take you a little time to get used to. But once you can do it and you become proficient at it, you're really going to be doing what is considered a good review of the literature.